Hello and welcome to Forever Motorsports here for our daily Formula One news video. Today our title is Toto Wolff's replacement. So an article has come out from planetf1.com just saying that Toto Wolff has announced that the Formula One driver Jerome D'Ambrosio, who joined Mercedes in March, will be the one to replace him if he cannot attend a Grand Prix this season. So of course a bit of a clickbaity title there. He's not going to be completely replaced, but nonetheless that is going to be his replacement should Toto Wolff be sick or unwell enough to make it to a race this season. Jerome D'Ambrosio will be his replacement. So D'Ambrosio, who spent a year on the Formula One grid with Marussia back in 2011 before venturing into Formula E, has already stated that the team boss experience having led the Venturi racing team in the electric series. He swapped back to Formula One in March, signing as a Mercedes new driver development director with Wolff, saying at the time he can see Jerome growing in the organization, but at this stage that is his area. Toto Wolff carried on, and as it appears, the 37-year-old Belgian has already done just that as he takes up the position as Toto Wolff's right-hand man, replacing Williams team boss James Vowles in that role. So much so that Toto Wolff would should Toto Wolff miss a Grand Prix, it is going to be D'Ambrosio who will fill in for the team principal role. A quote from Toto Wolff now saying, "When I'm absent on a race weekend, Jerome will replace me," the Austrian told Auto Hebdo. It is true that in 11 years it has only happened 3 times, but it is a situation that we have to anticipate. Now he has to gain credibility within the team and in the paddock. He still has time, but in case I can't be there, he will be in my place. I mean, this is not uncommon to see team bosses having a replacement lined up just in case, because of course team bosses can't always be there at a race weekend. Often we do see Toto Wolff sitting it out and rather going to or sitting back at the factory on a race weekend to be there with his management rather, as well as being with the engineering team sometimes. And it often happens on multiple races in a row when Toto Wolff just cannot be there for every single Grand Prix. But nonetheless, moving on from this with another article about Toto Wolff. Toto Wolff has repeated Mercedes' confidence despite their setbacks. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has insisted he is confident his squad is heading in the right direction despite a testing weekend in Belgium. The Silver Arrows failed to walk away with a podium result in the last event before the summer break, with onboard footage of its car showing excessive bouncing along the straights. Mercedes' W13 Challenger last year promoted severe bouncing issues last season, and although it successfully eradicated most of the issues in time since, Spa's showing recently showed some alarm bells ringing at the team once again. In a quote from Toto Wolff, he says, "Yeah, we have a lot to analyze, but there is so much hard work that has been going on under the upgrades. The aero guys in operations to deliver even more upgrades. You've got to take your hat off. I think the flaw could have been a reason why we've been bouncing, but we're going to see it in the data. And maybe there's something which we need to fine-tune, because I still believe that the direction we're going now is the right one." Of course, Mercedes did ditch their zero sidepod concept midway through the season. In Monaco, they decided to go to a more traditional setting with normal side pods. And they are still trying to fine-tune it and get to the bottom of it. Nonetheless, it has brought a lot more pace to their car, and it is still going to take a couple more races before they can get it absolutely perfect. Nonetheless, yes, carrying on with this article, although it couldn't capture top 3 at the Belgian track, Wolff has asserted that Mercedes can take confidence from its form at Spa-Francorchamps when directly compared to its efforts at the circuit last year. When you compare it to the rest of the world, Spa was an awful race before the last stop. Perez, Leclerc and us were within 6 or 8 seconds. That's a major step for us because Spa was a disaster in 2022. So we feel we've made that step, but then you have to have the top guy that made another step in advance. We just got to, turn around the facts. So a little bit of, I think, frustration for Mercedes still trying to get to the bottom of their upgrades, but nonetheless, I think that they will be able to get to the bottom of those quite soon. Moving on to the next article now, talking a little bit about Ferrari in this week, ramping up towards the Zandvoort race. Little bit of a Ferrari article to make our Ferrari fans cry a little bit, maybe. Ferrari boss has spoken about an intense Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz talks, as face-to-face is the way that they've been doing it and not in front of reporters. Frederic Vasseur insists that his tough side is reserved for Monday mornings in front of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz rather than on live TV. The team principal, Frederic Vasseur, is the latest in a long line to take the position at the Scuderia. He has a relaxed and reserved personality within the Formula One paddock, but has offered an insight into another side of himself. You should ask the drivers, Vasseur told La Gazzetta Sport, when asked if the atmosphere at Maranello was too nice. You will never see my tough side when I have to say certain things to a team member. I'm not emotional. I discuss face to face. For me, it makes no sense to do these things in public. On Monday mornings, they hear from me often, but with a precise list of things to do, and not in front of reporters from a one-man show that doesn't help anyone. Vasseur took over from Mattia Binotto this season in an attempt to lead Ferrari to their first Drivers' Championship since 2007 with, I think it was Kimi Räikkönen. But Leclerc and Sainz, given that Vasseur does not consider either as his undisputed number one driver, has not come to the challenge of Red Bull's Max Verstappen. In a quote, he says, frequent and good, he described his relationship and talks with the two Ferrari drivers. Ferrari is a very famous company, but it has a reasonable size. At least once a week, I have dinner with CEO Benedetto Vigna, and I hear President John Elkann on the phone like an antibiotic. Morning, lunch, and dinner. Having a relationship like this is a huge advantage. If you have to make a decision, the process is very fast. When I was at Renault, for certain changes, you had to wait for the executive committee to meet. Days and days went by before any news would come by. When I was at Renault, here a problem I ask in the morning and can have an answer in the afternoon. I can speak for the past, but I can't speak for the past, but I was very impressed by the internal communication within the top management and their responsiveness. Certainly not something that you do see within some other teams, especially at the moment looking like Alpine, who seem to just be not really very comfortable with their managerial side of things, but nonetheless. Carrying on though to another Ferrari article, Charles Leclerc being said that he will be rewarded for his patience with Ferrari. Certainly at the moment not looking like that patience is certainly being rewarded at all, with him just really struggling there in that Ferrari seat. The article from planetf1.com reads on to say Charles Leclerc, his apparent unwavering loyalty to Ferrari will eventually yield a reward for the Monegasque driver, according to a former Formula One racer. Leclerc has had a season and a half left. Leclerc has had a season and a half left on his current long-term Ferrari deal, having first raced for the Scuderia in 2019 after enjoying their support through the junior categories. It hasn't been an easy ride for Leclerc in the 5 years he's been with Ferrari, having had to watch on as a contemporary rival to Max Verstappen has romped to countless victories and multiple championships. Leclerc unable to compete due to Ferrari's relative lack of speed, reliability, and operational sharpness. David Kennedy has said Frederic Vasseur has an exceptional pedigree in Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Former Formula One racer David Kennedy, a multiple Le Mans winner and Formula Junior driver for Ferrari, has said that team boss Frederic Vasseur, though his involvement with States Grand Prix, believes that Vasseur's appointment as a replacement for Mattia Binotto will eventually lead to stability and a more competitive Ferrari as he molds the team in his image. I think it is absolutely the right thing. Ferrari had so many political appointments in there, and some of them were very poor in the trenches experience, shall I say, he told Planet F1 in an exclusive interview from Montello Park in Ireland. Fred has earned his spurs in all the major junior categories and has exceptional pedigree. He'll know the business from nuts and bolts all the way through. This is a people business, and you will know who the stars are in terms of engineers and designers. He's been at the coalface long enough, and I think given a little bit of time, and if Ferrari doesn't do what they often do by getting wobbly knees and pulling the rug from under them, they'll get him on with it. I remember when Jean Todt started, he had a tough couple of years till he got the pieces in place, and when he did, they were dynamite. And I think Fred is still in that process at the moment. Certainly, that is what we do see in the past, because it takes a while for new team principals to get those signings that they'd like, get those future drivers and managers or mechanics. It definitely takes a lot of time to be able to get the right personnel in place, because of course it takes a couple of years to be able to find the right people to I mean, it's not something that necessarily happens overnight, unfortunately. And we will have to wait and see what does happen over the rest of his time in Ferrari. But nonetheless, we certainly do hope that he has a bit of a longer tenure than Mattia Binotto, who was only given, I think, 2 years in that Ferrari outfit. Nonetheless, carrying on with this, he said, I remember when Jean Todt started, he had a couple tough years, as did Mattia Binotto. And then carrying on, he says, I really don't think so. He said he's probably taken his eyes off the ball. I think speaking about Charles Leclerc at the moment, all the time he was a young man, fired up, corralling all the correct pieces together. He was the right man at the time, but time has moved on. He would probably do more unsettling rather than settling, so I don't think he would be the right choice. I think possibly speaking about bringing someone else in there. David Kennedy on Charles Leclerc now, with Ferrari on a rebuilding path at the moment. Kennedy believes now is not the time for Charles Leclerc to consider a move to another team. Rumours in 2023 have circulated about a possible move to Mercedes in a seat swap with Lewis Hamilton. Rumours have also swirled that Leclerc has already recommitted his future to Ferrari beyond the 2024 mark, and Kennedy reckons that the Monegasque's patience will be ultimately rewarded. There's a great phrase, hindsight is a foresight to a gobshite, he said. It is exceptionally difficult to tell what the future is. You can get the best people and get them in a solid working environment, and good things will come from that. They've got the brand, they've got the pedigree, the team management, the finance, the drivers, and there's no reason why they should not be at the sharp end of Formula One. I mean, it certainly has been a bit of a challenge in the past few years, wondering why Ferrari just have not been able to make the correct moves in Formula One. They have the best drivers, they have the best team members, the best mechanics. It's very frustrating as to why they are not doing as to what we would expect them to be doing in Formula One. They are, I mean, the most historical team, the team that you think of when someone says Formula One, and it's just, once again, super, super disappointing not to have them at the forefront at the moment, because, as I said, we just want to see Ferrari at the front of the grid, and we don't want to see them where they are at the moment, sitting in the midfield, or the upper midfield, that is. Nonetheless, moving on to some more articles here from I'm trying to find the name of this article. F1briefings.com, just saying that Christian Horner has now confirmed Sergio Perez Red Bull future for 2024. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner has confirmed that Sergio Perez will not be replaced before the end of his contract, meaning he is to race for the team until the end of the year. Not only that, but he has also revealed that Sergio Perez may continue with Red Bull beyond 2024 if he continues to deliver. This may come as a bit of a relief for Sergio Perez, considering the rumours and speculations that were doing the rounds as a result of his underperformance, and also considering that the sudden decisions that team Red Bull have taken pertaining to its drivers, while on the other hand, his teammate Max Verstappen has been leading the championship, winning the last 8 races of the season. The pressure on Perez may have doubled after the sudden sacking of AlphaTauri driver Nick de Vries on performance grounds. He was replaced by Red Bull reserve driver Daniel Ricciardo, who previously never hesitated to say that he'd like to retire from the sport after racing for Red Bull again. However, Horner has brushed aside the anticipation of Perez being replaced anytime soon, speaking to Speed Cafe on the current scenario with Perez. He was quoted as saying, "We have a contract and we are happy with Sergio Perez at the moment, and he will be our driver not only for this year but also next year. But for us, it's always good to have the whole purpose of AlphaTauri and Toro Rosso before was training drivers as potential candidates for Red Bull Racing. That's why with Nick, it didn't feel like he was going to be a Red Bull Racing candidate. So the argument you put us in does make sense to keep going." I mean, that certainly makes sense as to why they got rid of Nick de Vries from that AlphaTauri seat, because they didn't necessarily see him moving up to that number one team, and that's the whole point of you being in the AlphaTauri seat. If you're not going to have the potential of being promoted to the Red Bull seat, what is the point in having you in the AlphaTauri seat in the first place? Because, I mean, essentially the AlphaTauri seat is a feeder seat for the Formula One main team, which is, of course, Red Bull Racing. Yeah, Horner said that Red Bull may extend Sergio Perez's contract if he continues to deliver as per their expectations. If not, then they won't be just looking at AlphaTauri drivers for a suitable replacement, but also other potential drivers who would like to drive a Red Bull car. Certainly, we'd expect there to be a lot of drivers down the rest of the grid that would be all too happy to take that Red Bull seat away from Sergio Perez. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo will be eyeing that seat if he can improve his pace a little bit. Also, we will have, I think Alex Albon still, he's showing a lot of pace in the Williams car at the moment. I certainly think that in the next few years, he could be another candidate to take that Red Bull second seat if he does continue to up his pace. When asked if Ricciardo would be too old to be considered as a Red Bull driver for 2025, Horner dismissed the notion, stating that age was not a barrier. That leaves the Red Bull doors open for the Australian driver, he said. I mean, if Max is fired up till 28, Checo's contract runs to the end of next year. If Checo delivers, we'll keep going on with Sergio. If he doesn't, for whatever reason, then it is understood that we won't be just restricted to AlphaTauri drivers, because there's an awful lot of drivers up and down the pit lane that would love to have a Red Bull drive seat. I don't see age as a barrier, though, speaking once again about that age limit of Daniel Ricciardo. He says, "When I see what Fernando Alonso is doing and Lewis Hamilton, it is all about what is up here in the mind that counts." Of course, I mean, drivers can be physically and mentally strong up until their 40s, as we're seeing with Fernando Alonso. So you can't necessarily count out a lot of drivers due to age. Of course, I mean, we do have a lot of young drivers making their way up through the junior motorsport ranks who will also be wanting to get into Formula One soon. But nonetheless, I mean, we have a lot of potential drivers still on the current grid who would love to get into that Red Bull seat. Now moving on to another article, moving away from our current drivers on the grid to a retired driver, Kimi Raikkonen. Kimi Raikkonen, who is now a team boss for Kawasaki, has said that during his Formula One career, he actually did get onto two wheels. So the headline for this article is, "Raikkonen on racing on two wheels. Formula One teams didn't know what I was doing." Kimi Raikkonen remains to this day the last Ferrari world champion in Formula One. The Iceman put a stop to his career after 2021. He is now a team boss of Kawasaki Racing Team, a team that competes in the MXGP motorbike class, among others. In 2001, Raikkonen entered Formula One. The Finn became a sensation, particularly due to his ice-cold behavior in front of the cameras. In total, the Formula One driver won 21 Grand Prix in 2007. He beat Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton by 1 point ahead of both drivers to clinch his only world title. After driving for Alfa Romeo team for 3 years, he retired from the sport after the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Raikkonen is now a team boss in Moto XGP as the team leader of Kawasaki Racing, and meanwhile, the Finn is pursuing another role within racing, and not only within motorsport. He is now the team boss of Kawasaki Racing Team. During his Formula One career, he was also occasionally on a motorbike, he says, on his team's website. Sometimes I went riding in small club races, but it was just for fun, and I have a small track at home where the kids race around. I did not race at the high level, and it felt I was a part of my fitness program. I didn't know what any of my teams thought about, as it was never mentioned to them. Of course, his teams would not be all too happy to hear that he was racing around on motorbikes, because it is deemed a bit more of a high risk sport, and often it is written into their contracts that they're not able to do any high risk activities in their time off, due to them possibly being able to break a wrist or injure themselves in another way. That would lead to them not being able to compete in their Formula One car. But nonetheless, Kimi Räikkönen is enjoying his time in motocross at the moment, and he is also ramping up to get his son into motorsports soon. His young son, I can't think of his name at the moment, but he's also teaching him at the moment to drive in karts. So that's also going to be a very interesting development to watch for the future. Will we see another Räikkönen in Formula One in the future? And then our final article that I have here for today is that Ferrari is no longer working on their 2023 car. A article here from the F1 Chronicle just says here, Ferrari is no longer working on its 2023 car in the wind tunnel. Team boss Frederic Vasseur has revealed the Maranello team is currently behind Red Bull, Mercedes, and even Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship, meaning Vasseur is now looking to 2024 more than the rest of this season. For the season, we have stopped development in the wind tunnel at the end of July, the Frenchman told La Gazzetta. But we have pieces already approved that we will take to Qatar or Austin. For the 2024 machine, we are still at the philosophical concepts. We need to think differently and find margins so the drivers can race without always being at the limit. But the deadline for the new car is not the end of the year. We have to be ready for Bahrain in March, so we still have many months ahead of us, Vasseur added. In the meantime, Vasseur has been busy trying to recruit new staff. We have hired about 25 people, but are looking for more, he said, pointing out that it is hard for Ferrari to woo British-based top engineers. We have signed a leading name, Vasseur added, which should start on the 1st of January 2025, but I'm also trying to convince Toto Wolff to release him sooner. I will try when we are on a boat together, he laughed. The first signings are the most difficult. The others then seem to follow suit. Behind the scenes, and despite rumours of disarray at Maranello, Vasseur says that things are going well at Ferrari. At least once a week, I have dinner with Vigna and Elkin, carrying on with what we spoke about earlier on in the first article. It's very interesting to see that Ferrari are trying to make massive investments for their future. Of course, this is what we want to see, because we want to see Ferrari returning to the top of motorsport. Of course, it's what is the most important, of course, at the moment, to see Ferrari returning to the pinnacle of Formula One, because they just have seemed to be off the pace at the moment for quite some time. I'm just checking Twitter at the moment to see if there are any other developments. If not, then I will start to wrap up. But nonetheless, I have seen one picture or two here from Zach Brown and Adrian Newey. Very, very interestingly, that we have Adrian Newey wearing a McLaren cap and Zach Brown wearing a Red Bull hat. I wonder if it is currently a bit of wooing going on from Adrian Newey and Red Bull, trying to get McLaren possibly to sign on as a Red Bull engine partner, because of course in 2026 Red Bull will be producing its own Formula One engines and will be looking to supply other teams down the grid with engines. This could be possibly some bit of tactics from Red Bull to try and get Adrian Newey to coax the team boss of McLaren, Zach Brown, to sign on Red Bull as their engine supplier for 2026 and onwards. Could we be seeing that? It would be very interesting to see, because of course Red Bull are putting a lot of effort into their powertrains alongside with Ford, who will be coming to help them with their energy recovery units. And Nonetheless, it could be a very, very exciting development to wait and see if McLaren does indeed sign on with Red Bull as their engine supplies going onwards. At the moment, they are with Mercedes for their engine supplies, but they could be moving away from them and moving to Red Bull. Nonetheless, that is it from me today. Not a lot of news, unfortunately, but it is going to be a very exciting race week ahead of us. Of course, we are back into another race week here with the Dutch Grand Prix ahead of us. Do be sure to go and watch my track review where you can watch Max Verstappen driving around the Dutch Grand Prix track so you can get a little bit more insights into what this race weekend has ahead of us. Nonetheless, that is it from me, Reece. It is going to be a very exciting race week. Do be sure to follow the channel, subscribe, like the video. There's going to be a lot more content being put up for you. Nonetheless, though, thank you very much for watching with me. My name has been Reece.